Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Renuka and with me is R.S. Raghu, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India announces liberalized and accelerated Phase 3 strategy of COVID-19 vaccination. Everyone above the age of 18 years to be administered COVID-19 vaccine from 1st of May. Delhi enters 6-day-long lockdown to contain rapid rise of coronavirus cases. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson postpones a visit to India owing to the coronavirus situation in the country. France recalls 15 diplomats from Pakistan in the wake of violent protests. NASA's helicopter makes history by performing successful flight on planet Mars. And in IPL cricket, Chennai Super Kings take on Rajasthan Royals at Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. As the number of COVID cases are on the rise again, we appeal to our listeners not to lower the guard, follow all the precautions, and all those above 45 years to get vaccinated without any hesitation. Stay safe and protected by following these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail. India has announced that everyone above the age of 18 years will now be administered COVID-19 vaccine from 1st of May. The central government on Monday announced a liberalized and accelerated Phase 3 strategy of COVID-19 vaccination. A decision in this regard was taken during a meeting chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In this phase, the vaccination will continue as before in the government vaccination centre free of cost to the eligible population, including healthcare workers, frontline workers and all people above 45 years of age. During this phase, vaccine manufacturers will supply 50% of their monthly released doses to the central government and they will be free to supply the remaining 50% doses to states as well as in the open market. The manufacturers will transparently make an advance declaration of the price of the vaccine that will be available to the state government and in open market. Private hospitals will have to procure their supplies of COVID-19 vaccine exclusively from the 50% supply earmarked for other than the central government channel. The Prime Minister said that the government has been working hard from over a year to ensure that maximum number of Indians are able to get the vaccine in the shortest time. He added that India is vaccinating people at world record pace and the country will continue this with even greater momentum. The central government from its share will allocate vaccines to states and union territories based on the criteria of the extent of infection and the speed of administration. All vaccination will be the part of the National Vaccination Program and mandated to follow all protocols such as being captured on CoWIN platform. The Delhi government has decided to impose a 6-day-long lockdown in the national capital to contain the rapid rise of coronavirus cases. After a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor today, Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal announced that the lockdown will come into effect from Monday 10 p.m., which will continue till 5 a.m. of next Monday. He said people engaged in essential services and facing emergency conditions will be allowed for movement during the lockdown on producing the valid documents. Expressing concern over the rising cases of coronavirus in the city, Mr. Kejriwal said health facilities are witnessing shortage of several medical supplies like beds, oxygen and medicines. He said the lockdown period will be utilized for creating health infrastructure in the national capital. He thanked the central government for providing a helping hand in this crisis situation. He urged the people to follow the COVID-19 appropriate behavior and guidelines to contain the spread of this infectious disease.
In view of the prevailing COVID situation, the visit of UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson to India has been mutually postponed. Mr. Johnson was scheduled to visit the country later this month. The External Affairs Ministry has informed that the two sides will be holding a virtual meeting in the coming days to launch plans for a transformed India-UK relationship. It said that both the countries attach the highest importance to taking the India-UK partnership to its fullest potential and propose to remain in close touch in this regard. Both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Mr. Johnson would be meeting in person later this year. Meanwhile, India has administered over 12 crore 38 lakh doses of COVID-19 vaccine in the country so far. The Union Health Ministry said more than 12,30,000 beneficiaries were inoculated with doses of COVID-19 vaccine in the last 24 hours. Now let's take a look at the coronavirus updates from around the world.
Hong Kong has announced the suspension of all flights connecting with India for 14 days starting tomorrow amid the rising number of COVID-19 cases in the region. The authorities have also suspended flights from Pakistan and the Philippines. This comes hours after Hong Kong had invoked the flight-specific suspension mechanism to prohibit the landing of flights operated by two airlines, including one Vistara flight from Mumbai. India has been witnessing an unprecedented increase in COVID-19 infections and has been adding more than 2 lakh positive cases for the past 3 days. Amid the continuing spate of record daily deaths due to COVID-19, the government of Bangladesh has decided to extend the ongoing lockdown for 1 more week. State Minister for Public Administration Farhad Hossain said in Dhaka on Monday that the lockdown will remain in force from the 22nd of April to the 28th of April with the same restrictions imposed as in the previous week. He announced that it will be a stricter one. The notification will be issued after the decision is approved by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Bangladesh reported the 4th consecutive day of record number of COVID-19 deaths in the country on Monday. The U.S. pushes ahead with its vaccination drive, with half of the adults in the country having received at least one vaccine shot. The U.S. government announced on Sunday that close to 130 million Americans aged 18 or over have received a dose of one of the authorized coronavirus vaccines, which is 50.40% of the total adult population of the country. Greece has announced that travelers from the EU, Britain, the United States, Israel, Serbia, and the United Arab Emirates who are fully vaccinated or have a recent negative COVID test will no longer have to quarantine on arrival. Meanwhile, Australia and New Zealand kicked off their trans-Tasman travel bubble on Monday. The bubble removes the 2-week quarantine requirement for people travelling or returning to New Zealand from Australia. Prashant Kumar Sinha, World News.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
3 steps to stay protected and stay safe from COVID-19. Wear face mask, 2 gaz ki duri to maintain social distancing, maintain hand and face hygiene.
Welcome back to the World News. President of the United States, Joe Biden, last Wednesday announced that the U.S. troops will be withdrawn from Afghanistan starting on the 1st of May. The withdrawal of foreign troops, which is expected to be completed by 11th of September and put an end to America's longest war in history. External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, described the decision as a big step and reiterated India's stand that the peace process in Afghanistan should be Afghan-led and Afghan-owned. In today's Hotspot section, former Foreign Secretary Shashank is in conversation with journalist Nilova Roy Chaudhary to discuss the greater implication of the decision on Afghanistan, the region's peace and the larger geopolitical ramifications of the move.
We're talking about U.S. President Joe Biden's decision announced last week to withdraw all U.S. forces from Afghanistan by September 11, 2021, almost exactly 20 years after the devastating terrorist attacks on the U.S. led to the launch of that global war on terrorism, which was focused on Afghanistan. The NATO troops will also be withdrawn along with the U.S. troops. As you're aware, President Biden announced that it is now time to end the forever war, he said on 14th April. Its primary mission of denying terrorists a haven in Afghanistan. Now, in your assessment, Ambassador Shashank, would you say that that mission has actually been accomplished?
I don't think the Americans are talking of the mission being accomplished. What they're talking of right now is that, number one, 2 Republican and 2 Democratic presidents have taken charge of the American and NATO involvement in Afghanistan, from where they feel that the planning was done for the 9/11 attacks. Therefore, they don't want a 5th president to also get involved with this, which means that there seems to be some tiredness in the way the whole thing has been projected, number one. Secondly, the Americans have tried both a surge under President Obama and then a decision under President Trump that he would withdraw all the troops suddenly. So therefore, in between these 2 extreme positions, the Americans are saying that, well, they will withdraw by September, and after that, while bulk of the troops will go, but some would remain for the security of the American embassy in Afghanistan. So therefore, some technical support, etc., may still be there. And basically, it is nobody's case that America or any external force has to provide security in Afghanistan on a permanent basis. Even Indians who were, according to some experts who were once asked by the American presidents or their senior advisors that they should get involved either in Afghanistan or in Iraq or in other places. So the Indians had at that time said, look, we are willing to go for developmental activities, social welfare activities, but whenever it is a question of involvement of the troops, we go normally on the UN decision-making process. We don't do it on the basis of plurilateral or our own unilateral things unless there is something direct impact on India. So that we'll have to keep in mind that if there is a kind of consensus which develops in India that we need to increase our participation in peacemaking in Afghanistan, we can think of that. But at the moment, there is a consensus apparently in India that we should not get involved in Afghanistan. We should allow the other regional countries and America and other NATO powers to work out the arrangements in Afghanistan so that they can strengthen the American presence or American support to the Afghan National Security Forces.
But Shashank sir, the point is that this decision would seem to indicate that there is no possible military solution and that Taliban cannot really be sort of vanquished militarily, as it were. So they have to be perforce included into any kind of peacemaking process for the future of that country. Now, does this mean that, for India, the Taliban has always been a very difficult sort of entity with which to try and go into any business. So for India, which is going to be taking part on the April 24th Ankara meeting, what exactly does this really mean? The Taliban is calling the shots to some extent. They're saying they will not attend the Ankara meeting till the foreign troops are all out. But if they do attend, it isn't really the best of news for India, at least.
Well, quite right. This is really a worrisome position for India at present, that Taliban seem to be gaining the upper hand, number one. Secondly, Taliban have had support from the Pakistani security establishment who are feeling self-congratulatory to see that how they can increase their position in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And countries like Qatar, Turkey, and maybe some other regional powers, they feel that they can play a more important role. With India, the situation is that, we have spent a lot of money in social welfare and developmental activities in Afghanistan. We would not like that to go completely waste. That's number one. Secondly, Taliban have two identities. One is the Islamic identity plus the control by the Pakistani security establishment. And the second one is that many of them are Pashtuns. And Pashtuns generally don't have, if you find the general public in Afghanistan, they have very sympathetic and friendly feelings towards the Indians. So it is not that as such they are anti-Indians. But the point is that when it becomes a combination of the Taliban as Islamic forces, plus whatever support they get from the other Islamists elsewhere and the Pakistani security establishment, then they try to do this. So we have to put pressure on Pakistan to behave in a more responsible manner. Secondly, we have to work along with the other regional countries to make sure that Taliban, or there are supposed to be over 22 groups which are fighting in Afghanistan for control over different parts of the Afghan territory. So we have to just make sure that they all try to behave more responsibly and do not keep Afghanistan unstable all the time.
But Ambassador, that is easier said than done. And all said and done, India does have extremely legitimate stakes in Afghanistan. We've invested well over $2.3 billion there in, as you said, a lot of infrastructure and other social works. And we do have, on average, the Afghan has a good impression of India and is favorably inclined. But Pakistan, as you rightly said, has been constantly trying to be inimical to India and trying to keep it out of Afghanistan in any which way. We were also the first country to have the strategic partnership with Afghanistan, as you know.
Not only strategic partnership with Afghanistan, but also we developed a trilateral partnership with Afghanistan and Iran. And the Shah Bahar port and the infrastructure linkages going up to Afghanistan and beyond into Central Asia, they were all developed, and we got a special dispensation from the Americans that there will be no sanctions imposed on this infrastructure connectivity despite whatever their LISA or ISA Act is there in the American Congress against Iran. Therefore, we have a real we must work hard on this. It's not an easy situation. We have many people in India who have personal friendships with people in Afghanistan. And we must try to build up on those friendships. Then we have friends in many of the countries in the Gulf and in Central Asia. We should build up on these friendships. And we cannot make out a case that Americans have to stay there permanently. That would be a very weak position to be taken by a country like India, that a foreign country should keep permanently control over the sovereignty of Afghanistan. Therefore, we have to give the primary role to Afghanistan. Then the regional countries have to come together to make sure that Afghanistan, whatever achievements have been made, particularly, let's say, in their democratic processes, particularly for their women education, their women getting into the various activities, social and official activities. So I think there should not be reversal on all that.
No, I completely agree with you, and I appreciate what exactly it is that you're saying, Ambassador. But the point is that if so many rounds of talks, as far as I'm aware, there have been 23 rounds of separate talks and all that were happening between the various groups led by the United States in that effort. Despite all of that, the Taliban and the inter-Afghan conversation has not really even begun per se. So what will really make that change? The Afghan defense minister was in Delhi last month, and he was fairly candid in saying that President Ghani is absolutely adamant that there have to be elections first, and then there would be any other processes of dialogue and resolution. And the situation today is different from what it was 20 years before. But the Taliban does not seem to accept that. So why would they now want to change, especially since they see this as a possible victory with the United States declaring it will leave?
Well, that is true that the Taliban feel it's a victory for them. That kind of a victory is a Pyrrhic victory. It will not help them at all. And Afghan people also are staunchly nationalistic people, number one. If you recall that originally when Pakistan was to be given recognition in the United Nations, the only country which did not agree to do that was Afghanistan. And we have to keep those things in mind. I think there is a feeling in India that really we cannot allow Indian security interests to be jeopardized in any way. And therefore we have taken a view that there are no good negotiators and no bad Taliban. So I think we need to build also linkages with the various people. The government may not be able to do that straight away, but I'm quite sure that we must be having many academics, many journalists, many other people. And also we have many of the people of Indian origin living in different parts of the Gulf and other places. We need to work through them. And then we have many friends, really in this region. In Afghanistan, if you remember that the Northern Alliance, along with Iran and India and Russia at one time, had been able to create the situation for a democratic form of government in Afghanistan. Later on, we withdrew and gave priority to the NATO and the United States.
Ambassador, as you said, the Gulf countries, the regional countries have been very active even in the background. And in fact, today, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar is in Abu Dhabi, as is the Pakistani Foreign Minister. And there are reports that the two of them are likely to be in a meeting sort of brokered by some well-wishing third parties like the United Arab Emirates. Is Afghanistan, do you think, a core issue of what they will be talking about in these discussions?
I don't know really, because these are discussions which have not been confirmed by either the Pakistan side or the Indian side. The UAE is the only one which has said that they are trying to work behind the scenes to bring about a dialogue between India and Pakistan. That if this dialogue takes place, it must include the issue of no terrorism in India, no terrorism in Kashmir, and then of course Afghanistan, because we have seen all these people who have moved, terrorists who have moved from Middle East, they are trying to move into South Asia and Southeast Asia. And therefore, it's an extremely important thing where Americans can simply say that, all right, there are so many thousands of kilometers away from Pakistan that Pakistan made a fool of them and collected billions of dollars. But UAE is nearby, Saudi Arabia is nearby. They cannot allow to do this. They have already withdrawn their assistance programs to Pakistan. So I think they are in an important position to use their leverage on Pakistan.
The other problem is, of course, as you said right at the outset, the basic problem, even the CIA director, William Burns, has sort of accepted that the U.S. withdrawal will come with a significant risk that groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda might again try to rebuild their presence in Afghanistan. And for them, plot attacks against U.S. interests. But for us, it's very worrisome, because if Afghanistan descends into that kind of chaos, The spillover effects in our region, I mean, not only into Pakistan, but legitimately into maybe places like Kashmir and all that in India is a huge worry.
We really have to make it very clear that India has been a soft power all this time, but we should be able to exercise hard power as we have done. We should tell them very clearly that if the Afghans want any kind of help from us, we should be quite willing to do that, except for putting boots on the ground or sending our instruments there. But we can give all kinds of technical support that the Afghans want. We should be quite willing to go ahead in that direction and gradually build a consensus in India in favor of a harder line so that whether it's ISIS or whether it is Al-Qaeda or others, they do not think in terms of converting India into the base for their Ghazwa-Hind or whatever they want to do, an Islamic state in South Asia.
Because that is a very legitimate and a long-lasting worry that all strategic thinkers and the Indian establishment, I'm sure, is extremely worried about. But I suppose we should wait and watch and see what happens in Ankara on the 24th of this month. If the Taliban perhaps joins in those talks, are you at all hopeful that there will be some forward movement?
Well, for the time being, they are doing their shadow boxing kind of thing. They are asking the Americans to leave by May. Mm-hmm. So still, maybe it's a bit too late for them to continue asking for this demand needs to be revised, first of all. And then they can talk about something which is more reasonable. I think they are perhaps trying to extract as many concessions as possible from the Americans. So the domestic situation, America makes it necessary for them to withdraw one way or the other.
So then I suppose the situation continues to remain very, very sort of uncertain, and we're not sure looking ahead what exactly is going to happen. I guess this is one of those situations where India doesn't really have too much to do but to wait and watch. Would you agree with that, Ambassador?
I will agree with that. Only thing is that we don't want Americans, as they had tried to build a kind of a dialogue between India and Pakistan for Afghanistan and Kashmir, that we don't want them. So without that kind of a scenario, we can think in terms of the direct impact on the Indian security. And for that, if we have to carry out any kind of dialogue with the neighboring countries or with USA or NATO powers and all that, we should be quite prepared to do that. And we should also bring into this calculation this new Quad formula that we are thinking of as to what does it mean for us. I mean, if you're thinking only of maritime security, does that mean security for India also? Does it mean security only for some American allies in that region, in this South China Sea area?
I think we've sort of come up today with as much as we can. We'll thank you so very much, Ambassador Shashank.
Thank you.
France has recalled 15 diplomats from Pakistan in the wake of violent protests and clashes involving a banned group. The Pakistan government banned the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan (TLP) under the Anti-Terrorism Act on Thursday after the group organized violent protests across the country for 3 days and challenged the authorities. At least 2 policemen were killed in clashes with TLP supporters. A total of 15 French diplomats, mostly secretaries and aides to department heads, have already left Pakistan or are set to return to Paris over the next few days, La Figaro newspaper reported today. On Thursday, France advised its nationals and companies in Pakistan to temporarily leave the country because of the violent anti-France protests by TLP in many cities.
Marking the continuity of growing bilateral defense cooperation with the French Air and Space Force, Air Chief Marshal R.K.S. Bhadauria left for France today on 5 days official visit. The visit will enhance potential avenues for strengthening the level of interaction between the Indian and French Air Forces. During his visit, the Chief of Air Staff will hold meetings and discussions with senior military leadership of France and visit operational facilities and air bases. The two air forces have seen significant operational interaction in the recent past. External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, today spoke to his U.S. counterpart, Antony Blinken. The conversation covered recent developments in India's immediate and extended neighborhood. Dr. Jaishankar said both sides exchanged views on the United Nations Security Council UNSC agenda and also discussed issues pertaining to health cooperation between the two countries.
NASA's Mars helicopter makes history with successful flight on the Red Planet. As per the U.S. Space Agency NASA, the miniature robot helicopter Ingenuity performed a successful takeoff and landing on Mars early today. The the first powered controlled flight by an aircraft over the surface of another planet. Mission managers at NASA's burst into applause and cheers as data beamed back from Mars confirmed that the 4-pound twin-rotor helicopter had performed its maiden 42nd flight as planned. The robot rotorcraft was programmed to ascend 10 feet straight up, then hover and rotate in place over the Martian surface for half a minute before settling back down on its 4 legs. Officials said data returned from Mars showed that this had in fact occurred.
India's ambassador to China, Vikram Misri, on Monday interacted with Chinese scholars from various think tanks and universities at an event organized at the Consulate General of India, Guangzhou. Ambassador Misri emphasized that maintenance of peace and tranquility in border areas is an essential basis for the development of bilateral relationship. He underlined that there is a need to be respect for mutual concerns and sensitivities and for each other's priorities. A report from a Beijing correspondent.
India has been repeatedly highlighting the importance of complete disengagement in border areas as essential basis for the development of bilateral relationship, while China is keeping silence on the issue. Last week also at an online event between Indian think tank Indian Council of World Affairs and Chinese think tank Chinese People's Institute of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Misri highlighted the importance of mutual sensitivity and respect and the need of restoring peace and tranquility at the border for progress in bilateral relationship. Scholars from both the sides discussed working together for a development agenda of mutual interest and jointly coping with the challenges of the changing international structure in the post-pandemic era. Chinese ambassador to India, Sun Widong, also addressed the event. Chinese side has been trying to build a narrative to take forward the relations with India by ignoring the ongoing border issue, but India has consistently maintained that complete disengagement at the border is prerequisite to move forward. Anshuman Mishra for World News, All India Radio, Beijing.
Moving on to sports, in IPL cricket, chasing a target of 189 runs, Rajasthan Royals were 97 for 7 in 15 overs against Chennai Super Kings at Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai when reports last came in. Put into bat first, Chennai scored 188 for the loss of 9 wickets in the 20 overs with the help of Faf du Plessis' 33 runs, Ambati Rayudu's 27 and Moeen Ali's 26 runs. For Rajasthan, Chetan Sakaria picked up 3 wickets while Chris Morris scalped 2 dismissals. Earlier, Rajasthan Royals won the toss and elected to field.
In the stock market, the Sensex and the Nifty today plunged around 1.8% amid resurgence of coronavirus case in the country. The domestic stocks declined even as the cues from global equity markets were positive. The Sensex at Bombay Stock Exchange closed below 48,000 mark, while the Nifty at National Stock ended below 14,400 level. The rupee also witnessed a robust appreciation of 52 paise against the US currency.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Wall Street Journal reports that union appeals Amazon's election in Alabama, saying that the company violated laws. The Telegraph reports that Stefanos Tsitsipas wins Monte Carlo Masters without dropping a set. The Guardian reports that Boris Johnson says government will try to stop European Super League.
A quick look at the headlines once again. India announces liberalized and accelerated phase 3 strategy of COVID-19 vaccination. Everyone above the age of 18 years to be administered COVID-19 vaccine from 1st of May. Delhi enters 6-day long lockdown to contain rapid rise of coronavirus cases. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson postpones visit to India owing to the coronavirus situation in the country. France recalls 15 diplomats from Pakistan in the wake of violent protests. NASA's helicopter makes history by performing successful flight on planet Mars. And in IPL cricket, Chennai Super Kings take on Rajasthan Royals at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnavajan, by artists from Zimbabwe. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.